Hey, Clayton, how did dinosaurs fit into the story of Genesis? I love this question because I love dinosaurs. Always have, always will. From the very beginning of my life, I was just obsessed with dinosaurs. They are incredible. And what I love is that if you actually look at the history of paleontology, you find out that the earliest people to study dinosaurs were actually Christians. Christians who were investigating God's world and finding these giant bones buried in the ground and saying, what is going on here? And from the beginning, there always was a question of how does this fit in with the biblical account of creation and what we know about God making the world? And so from time to time, when people are reading through Genesis, they'll ask that question. They'll say, look, it talks about God making all of the creatures of the world, the ones that fly around and swim and walk on the land, and it talks about creating human beings, and it just doesn't ever mention dinosaurs. And obviously, we don't have dinosaurs around, so where do they fit in this whole story? And it really does come down a lot to how you understand the first chapters of Genesis and that whole creation account in Genesis chapter 1 talking about the 7 days of creation. Now, there are actually 3 different views of that Genesis 1 account of the days of creation. 3 views that here at our church we say, these are kind of all in bounds, okay? So if you're at our church, you can hold any one of these positions and find other people who believe them. Different pastors hold different views. So we don't take a stance on which of these views we think is the one definitive view. We say lots of Christians could agree to any one of these and disagree, and it's not a big deal. So here are the 3 views. There is the 24-hour day view, the day-age view, and the evolutionary creation view. And so the simple version of these, the 24-hour day view, looks at Genesis chapter 1 and says, this is a straightforward, very literal description of an ordinary week of 7 24-hour days. That at the very beginning, the universe did not exist, and over the course of 7 24-hour days, God made the world and brought into being all that there was. And probably that happened a very short amount of time ago. So we're talking about thousands of years, not millions or billions of years ago. And so the 24-hour view is the one that says this is a very straightforward, literal account. The day-age view says this account is actually a little bit more symbolic. It's a kind of a poetic or a kind of an artistic way of describing a long process that God used. They appeal to verses like, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years like a day. It's the idea that time works differently for God, and there are ways of using the word day to express a long period of time. And so they would say this describes kind of phases of God's creative work over the course of a long period of time, millions or billions of years. And it doesn't mean that it all was created in 1 week. And so you don't have the challenge of, dinosaurs would have been made just, a little bit before human beings, and there's only about a day separating them or hours separating them, and so they would have existed at the same time. So it makes sense that there could be dinosaurs that would have existed long before human beings. Or evolutionary creation is the view that this is, again, a poetic description of God's activity, and it's not answering the scientific question of how God created the world, but of who created it, why he created it, what kind of world he made. It's answering different questions, and it's a kind of artistic way of describing this, of saying who is God. But it doesn't actually tell us anything about the scientific process. And there are all sorts of reasons for that. I won't get into it. But if you hold the evolutionary creation view, you essentially say the process that God used was the process described by science, where God used natural processes like evolution to create the creatures that are there. So here's what this means. If you hold a 24-hour view of creation, it necessarily means that you believe that dinosaurs and humans lived together at the same time a very short amount of time ago. We're talking about 4 to 10,000 years. That's usually how old the 24-hour view holds the Earth is. So that means that dinosaurs existed at the same time as Adam and Eve and their children. And usually what people will hypothesize, because again, dinosaurs are not mentioned in the Bible, they hypothesize that sometime before or during Noah's flood, the dinosaurs went extinct, that they were not on the ark, and so they went extinct during the flood. Now, the question, of course, arises, why were they not on the ark when, it says every animal they were supposed to be on the ark? Why didn't they get on the ark? Obviously, the ark wouldn't be big enough for all of these different dinosaurs. But again, this is a kind of a blank spot on it. So people would say, well, we're going to hypothesize different sorts of things. And they might even suggest that some of the kind of aquatic dinosaurs would have survived Noah's flood and maybe existed well beyond that time. And so the real challenge with that view is it's very out of sync with the interpretation of the scientific evidence that we have about dinosaurs. And so it requires a kind of rethinking of how you understand science and a whole lot of different fields of scientific study. And so that's how the 24-hour view would work out. This would be the view that if you, say, went to the Creation Museum in Kentucky, this would be the view they hold. So they have hold depictions of human beings alongside dinosaurs. The second view is the day-age view, and really the day-age view and the evolutionary creation view hold the same idea about dinosaurs. They say, look, there's a long period of time prior to the creation of human beings in which all sorts of creatures could have come and gone, where God made and did different things, and there could have been creatures that came and went extinct, and it is not a problem to say that 65 million years ago, there were these large creatures that existed. And so the only debate between the day-age and the evolutionary creation view is what process God used to create those species. Did he use the process of evolution, or did he do it kind of independently in kind of, discrete, kind of miraculous creation events? And so that would be the same answer. They would say human beings and dinosaurs didn't exist at the same time. It existed long before human beings. So by the time you get to Genesis 2, Adam and Eve, dinosaurs are long gone. Now, I'll tell you this, personally, over the course of my life, I have held all three of those views at some point. So I think there are good reasons why someone might be convinced of any one of those positions. At this point in my life, I have settled on the evolutionary creation view. So when my kids ask me, hey, where are the dinosaurs in Genesis? I tell them a story that is very similar to the scientific account they'll find in a secular science book, but I fill in the details and I say, these are creatures that God made. He loves them. He came up with them. It was his idea. And anybody, no matter what view you hold, you should do this, okay? You should say, this is incredible. One of the things we should praise God for is the Tyrannosaurus Rex. There should be worship over the fact that Triceratops existed. We should thank God that Velociraptor is a thing, right? These are incredible creatures that God made, and it should bring us joy. So that childhood wonder that you have experienced over dinosaurs, or I certainly hope you've experienced over dinosaurs, is a good thing. It is part of agreeing with God when he looked at his creation, he said, it is good. That includes the dinosaurs. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.